Please welcome to the stage founder and CEO of Web Summit, Paddy Cosgrave.
Oh wow, this is a full house. Good evening, Vancouver. A huge welcome to all those who have traveled from more than 100 countries from around the world. You're all incredibly welcome. This is the inaugural Web Summit Vancouver, and we're really delighted to have you all here. We're at a pivotal moment in history. Technology is advancing faster than ever, transforming how we live, work, and connect. The world is also changing from a unipolar one to a multipolar one. And everyone, everywhere is asking, what the hell is going on? What is their future going to look like? And that's, I think, why many of you are here. Web Summit, I hope, is a window into our shared and increasingly technology-driven future. Over the next few days, we'll welcome more than 15,000 attendees from over 100 countries, including thousands of startups. We've got over 250 world-class speakers across all of our stages, across 3 levels, from tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, to some of the most exciting new and young startups in the world. We've over 600 investors in the room from around the world scouting for the next breakout startup. Our partners include Salesforce, IBM, MasterCard, SAP, and Google. And over 500 of the world's media are here, from Canada's CBC to Bloomberg, from the Wall Street Journal to the Globe and Mail, and on and on. We had been considering where to go next for our Web Summit event in North America. Some folks from British Columbia, including Minister Brenda Bailey and Mayor Ken Sim, kept telling us that our destination should be Vancouver. And at first, to be honest, I wasn't sure for a range of reasons. But last year, I came to Vancouver for the first time, and I genuinely was blown away. The city is stunning, the natural beauty, the backdrop of the North Shore Mountains. But what really stood out were the people and the momentum in the tech sector that I experienced firsthand. To everyone helping make Web Summit happen, our industry partners, various government agencies, and the Web Summit team, a huge, huge thank you. A special thank you to the Government of British Columbia, especially the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation, or JEDI, quite an acronym, and Minister of Finance, Brenda Bailey in particular. Her early support Minister Bailey's early support was genuinely instrumental in bringing Web Summit to Vancouver. Thank you as well to the Government of Canada, and in particular to the Mayor and his team for championing this from the very, very start. Mayor Ken Sim was one of the first voices pushing for Vancouver to host Web Summit, so it's only right that he joins us now. An incredible leader who reflects the spirit of this great city. Please give the Mayor a warm, warm welcome. Mayor, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, go Ken. Wow. By the way, show of hands here, can we get a cheer? Can people make noise if they're not from Vancouver? Woo! Welcome to Vancouver. We'll follow up on that in a sec here. Hey, listen, before we get started, we do want to get this started right. I do want to acknowledge that we are hosting the Web Summit on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I do want to thank them for their generosity and their hospitality and the love and care they show this land that we get to live, work, and play on. And I do think it's incumbent upon all of us to unlearn what we've learned in the past, learn the true history as to what's happened on these lands. And you know what? If we do that, we are going to build an incredibly bright future full of love and prosperity and abundance, not just for all of us here today, but going out way past 7 generations. And so I just put my hands up to Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. All right, I guess. And so, like I said earlier, welcome to Vancouver. It's really cool that you're here. It's an absolute honor to be here today with Patty to help kick off the very first Web Summit in Vancouver, the best city in Canada. It's got to say. Sorry, Toronto, we love you as well. You guys come in a very close, well, behind Vancouver. No, we love Toronto. Now, I just want to say how excited we are to welcome the world's top innovators, creators, disruptors, risk takers, entrepreneurs to our city. You're going to have a blast here. You're going to feel right at home. Oh, here we go. You've landed in one of the, obviously Vancouver is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but you know what? Vancouver is more than just the views. And obviously you saw, like if you're new here, you saw the mountains, the waters, the water, the sunshine, but you know what? We're way more than that. You know, this is a city built on bold ideas, on collaboration, and on the belief that the future doesn't just happen. It's something that we create together. And we're home to nearly 100,000 highly skilled tech workers. And we have one of the fastest growing tech pipelines in North America, thanks to our local ecosystem. And leading institutions like the University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser University, BCIT, and Northeastern University, Vancouver. Now, from AI to clean tech, to digital media, to life sciences, to video games, to cinematic special effects, from augmented reality to blockchain to crypto, the list goes on and on. And Vancouver companies are solving real-world problems and defining entire industries. Over the last 5 years alone, more than $40 billion has been invested in tech companies headquartered right here in Metro Vancouver. And so global giants like Microsoft and Amazon call the city home, alongside some really incredible local leaders like Sanctuary AI, Clio, and Obcelera. It's that mix of international reach and homegrown talent that makes our ecosystem incredibly special. But this week isn't just about showcasing what has been done here so far. It's about showcasing what's possible. So Web Summit Vancouver is a launch pad. It's a platform for new ideas and partnerships and for big, bold thinking. So Patty, Casey, and the entire Web Summit team, I want to thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to host Web Summit. There was a time, as Patty mentioned, it wasn't even in the cards, and you mentioned that we advocated it. There are so many other people that actually did all the hard work, and there were a bunch of people that actually flew down to Brazil when this thing was dead in the water, and they saved it. And I'm not going to mention all the names because I'm going to miss about 10 of them. But there are so many people in this ecosystem that feel so strongly about what we're doing here, and they fought the battle. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. We are definitely not going to let you down. Look, all I got to say is we're really proud to join the Web Summit family, and we're thrilled that this energy has come to the West Coast. I do want to give another shout out to our team, the Naturally Innovative Alliance, which includes my team at the City of Vancouver, the Province of BC, Invest Vancouver, Innovate BC, Destination Vancouver, and Pacifican. They all played a massive part in making this happen. Yeah. And I have no doubt that this week is going to be absolutely incredible. So I hope you guys have an amazing time. I hope you guys collide with a bunch of individuals, fall in love with our city, and come back, invest in companies here, do business with companies here, create the future here. Vancouver's open for business, and we're so glad you're here. So have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, we welcome some special guests, our startups, builders, founders, entrepreneurs, both local and international. Please welcome an incredible group of startups to join us on the stage for the opening.
Takes a from my. Hi everyone, my name is Ricardo, or Ricardo. I'm from Portugal. I don't know if we have more people from Portugal, at least. Yay! And I'm head of startups and investors at Web Summit. And as Paddy says, a lot of the time, startups are the reason of being for Web Summit. Without the startups, we wouldn't have a show. We have more than 1,100 companies taking part on our startup program. These are some of them. We are incredibly excited because we have founders from more than 64 countries. So let's hear from where some people are joining us.
Dan from Sensei, we're based out of Singapore.
Singapore.
I'm Zara from San Francisco.
San Fran. Any other people from San Fran? Woo!
Here in Vancouver.
Here in Vancouver. Where's Vancouver?
I'm from Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. Anyone from Bangladesh? Bangladesh.
I'm from Nigeria.
Nigeria in the house.
Vancouver.
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 Kyiv, Ukraine.
Ukraine. So that's just a proof of the international presence here at Web Summit from the startups. They're here to connect with clients, with investors, with partners. So please do not miss them at the event. Back to Paddy.
Fantastic, Rick. Thank you so much. Before we get things opened, I just have one question because the media keep asking me. They presume that there's no one here from the United States. Is there anybody here from the US? Come on, it's okay. You can make some noise. Well, you're incredibly welcome. We've got a couple of hundred startups from the United States. Contrary to sort of the media kind of cloud, there are lots of startups, lots of entrepreneurs that are just plowing on, irrespective of anything else going on in the world. So you're incredibly welcome, and I hope you have a wonderful few days in Vancouver, Canada. Ken, it's time to get Web Summit started. Let's go, Vancouver.
Thanks.
Please welcome to Center Stage, our very own co-host of Web Summit Vancouver, global startup community builder, Casey Lau.
Hello, Vancouver. I was choking up back there with Ken's speech. It's pretty good. We're finally here, opening night of the inaugural Web Summit Vancouver. As a born and raised Vancouverite, you can imagine just how excited I am to have Web Summit here in my hometown for its first North American event. We have an absolutely stacked week of talks across the entire Vancouver Convention Center, where we discuss everything from the latest in AI innovations to where venture capital market is going in 2025, to the hottest in clean tech, quantum, digital entertainment, and more. And right here on center stage is where you'll find me and my co-hosts presenting the biggest talks over the next 3 days. So put your hands together and please welcome to center stage my co-hosts for Web Summit Vancouver, the founder of the Vancouver Tech Journal, William Johnson, and social media superstar OMG Hey Sam Levine. Thank you for dressing up, William. It's very good. All right, so first, before we get in, what are you guys looking forward to most this week at Web Summit Vancouver?
I mean, for me, Casey, in BC, innovation comes naturally to us. So when we're looking at AI to blockchain, AR, VR, health tech, Vancouver has so much to offer, such a wide range of innovation and tech. I'm excited for locals to discover what's in their backyard. I'm excited for people who are from out of town to discover everything we have to offer.
Awesome, great, great. Love your hat, by the way. Sam?
Absolutely. And speaking of that, I am so excited to share just how special Vancouver is and also to connect with other content creators, learn more about the creator economy. I want you to leave Vancouver. Actually, I never want you to leave Vancouver. I want you to stay here and love it just as much as I do.
Awesome, awesome. Amazing stuff. So definitely super excited to have you both here sharing the stage with me this week. Okay, let's get to the first of our 2 talks here at opening night.
For our first talk tonight, we sit here in Vancouver in 2025, and the moral debate over AI is more urgent than ever. From deepfake abuse and disinformation to labor displacement and algorithmic discrimination, AI is raising questions about who gets harmed, who benefits, and who is accountable. As generative models infiltrate education, journalism, healthcare, and national defense, the stakes aren't just technical, they're ethical, social, and deeply human.
Large language models can write poetry, solve math problems, and power billion-dollar businesses. But when it comes to moral reasoning, they fall dangerously short. Built to predict patterns, not understand principles, today's AI systems lack the ethical grounding needed to make responsible decisions. What kind of AI should we be building? And who decides the values behind the code?
Our first speaker tonight is a leading critic of unregulated AI growth, a cognitive scientist, best-selling author, and entrepreneur. He spent years warning that without real reform, AI will amplify bias, misinformation, and harm at scale. He argues it's not just a technical problem, it's a moral one. To explore the ethical void at the heart of AI, in conversation with Amy Nordrum from MIT Technology Review, please welcome Professor Emeritus at NYU, frequent contributor to the New York Times and the New Yorker, and a globally recognized voice in the debate over AI safety, Gary Marcus.
I was writing code when I was buying books about AI when I was 12. AI has always been part of what I've been interested in. The people running the show now seem to be morally indifferent to the consequences of the tools that we're building. It's discriminating against people, being used for misinformation, causing environmental harm, and because they can't really reason, that makes them dangerous.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Vancouver.
Great to be here with you tonight, Gary.
Great to be here with you.
So, Gary, I think it's fair to say that these days you are best known as an AI critic and a skeptic, even perhaps, particularly when it comes to generative AI. And we're going to get to all that in just a minute. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, you've spent most of your life working with this technology and have been a big proponent of it for many years. You even built a machine learning company about a decade ago and went on to sell it to Uber. So I'd love to begin with just you telling us, what do you see as the potential of artificial intelligence technology, and why are you such a big believer in it?
So first, let me say, I don't think of myself as a critic, though a lot of people do. I think of myself as a skeptic of what we have right now. I really do want AI to succeed. I think one of the places where it can have tremendous impact is on science, particularly on biology. If you think about biology, we have tens of thousands of different, or 20,000 different proteins, and we have so many variations of those. We have just tons of molecules floating around our body. And when you try to build a drug, you need to understand the interactions of all of those. But you really want to be able to think like a scientist. You want the raw compute of a computer that can do many things simultaneously, but the causal understanding of a scientist. I don't think anything we've built can do that, but someday we will, and completely revolutionize science. You think about one of my fields that I've worked in is cognitive neuroscience, something like that. You think about how little progress we've made on autism, depression, Alzheimer's, et cetera. Like, we haven't figured this stuff out. There's a lot still to figure out. I think AI could, in principle, be really helpful. I just don't think that if you throw a chatbot at it, that's the right way to solve the problem.
That is a very exciting possibility that you've spelled out there, but you are quite critical of generative AI and large language models in particular. So why is that?
Right, so the space of AI is very large, and we're looking at one tiny piece of the possible space of AI. People found this trick in 2017, and it had some nice low-hanging fruit. It's had some value in things like coding and brainstorming, but I think it's the wrong avenue. There are actually things I wrote for MIT Press in 2001 in a book called The Algebraic Mind, saying that this kind of system would be, for example, vulnerable to hallucinations because it didn't have proper database records. That's still true a quarter century later. I didn't expect that anything that I wrote in 2001 would still be true in 2025, and I think it's actually depressing how little progress we've made. We've made progress in some things, like we can synthesize graphics fantastically well. Anything that's about mimicry we can do really well. But things that are about reasoning, which is really important for science, among other domains, we're not so good at. You have one of these things write your biography, and it will make stuff up, and it can't even reason well enough to look them up in Wikipedia.
And you've argued before that these systems are not just performing badly in some cases, but causing actual harm. So what are some of the real harms that concern you most?
So people often say, Gary used to think AI is stupid, now he thinks it's dangerous. But some of the danger actually comes from the stupidity. The current AI can easily be abused, for example, to write misinformation at scale. Misinformation has always existed, but now you can make deepfake videos, and one just seemed to have influenced an election in Romania. You can have just armies of chatbots creating whatever narrative you want. And so the information ecosphere is, I think, more endangered than it's ever been. So, one risk is misinformation. Another, excuse me, is cybercrime. So there's actually multiple vulnerabilities there. So you can use these things to hack people's credentials. They also write code that's not very secure. For example, there's something called, I think, slop squatting or something like that. It's a funny name, which basically means that you have these things, they'll write Python code and say, install this package, and the package doesn't exist. So the bad guys figure that out, and they make a malware package or something like that that gets installed. And so there's all kinds of, excuse me, cybercrime vulnerabilities. Plus we have, in Washington, we've deregulated everything and gotten rid of anybody who might be competent to chase anything down. And so I think there's huge risk of massive cyber attacks this year. There's deepfake porn. There's what's happening in schools where everybody is basically cheating. There's a huge mess there. I mean, there are actually many downside risks. There might be a future AI. There probably will be. They'll have a different set of problems because it's smart. We have problems because it's dumb, and people do things like write tariff plans that make no sense in some countries.
You don't say. It is interesting because, yeah, in some ways you are saying these systems aren't performing. They're not as capable as the companies that are putting them out would make them out to be, but also that they're dangerous. And those are two interesting statements that you're arguing are true together.
Yeah, I mean, the danger really comes from giving a person or a machine power that it shouldn't have. So you could give a stupid, senile person power, and that could be dangerous. right? I mean, hypothetically speaking, to continue the narrative here, right? You know, there is the like super genius might cause problems thing. That's a different kind of thing. These AIs are not super geniuses, although another risk is they do serve as kind of reference machines in a certain way. And something that was just reported this week and is very interesting is Claude can be, which is the most recent version of Claude, can be persuaded to give people information about nerve gas and how to make it. Somebody just did what they call a jailbreak attack. It's not that Claude is that smart. There's just a lot of information it soaked up. But you would like that under lock and key. And in fact, they have a system prompt, which is a hidden prompt that goes into one of these systems every time you ask something or start a session or something like that. And the system prompt says, don't tell anybody about biological weapons. But the point is, again, it's really about stupidity. The system is too stupid to know when it's actually giving somebody information about chemical weapons. I don't know the jailbreak attack exactly, but I think it's probably one of these things like pretend you're such and such. You know, pretend that I need to solve this, or not even pretend, I am, you know, such and such. And then suddenly the door is unlocked. It doesn't really understand what it's supposed to do. And so that's stupidity. A smarter AI might be like, I'm not going to give you that information. Who do you think you're kidding?
Well, let's talk about hallucinations, which you also brought up there. This is a known problem, and there are now many research efforts at major tech companies that are trying to find ways to address it, make these models.
For 25 years, I just want to emphasize. I pointed this out in 2001. Like what I'll let you finish the question, but what they pretend always is, well, the solution is coming next week. Reid Hoffman said in 2023 to Time magazine, I'll bet any amount of money the problem will be solved in several months. So I posted on Twitter, hey, I'll put up $100,000. I didn't hear from them. So all these people make these claims, but they don't actually want to be accountable. Elon last year said that we would have AGI, he used slightly different words, by the end of 2025. I offered him $1 million bet. No word, no answer. Wall Street Journal knocked on his door, no answer. They don't want to be accountable. So they'll say this stuff like, oh, it's coming next week, like Elon has been saying about driverless cars since 2014. They have learned that it costs them nothing, that in general the media will not hold them to account, that their stock valuations will go up. The reality is we're not close to a solution to hallucinations.
Do you have any hope, just based on how these models are built, that that ever could be a solved problem?
I think some technology will solve it. I just don't think LLMs are the technology. So remember, we have all kinds of AI systems. For example, we have GPS navigation systems. They don't hallucinate. They have a properly represented data. They do a well-known calculation to do shortest path. They can do some estimates about time. They're not a problem. There's no ethical problem with a GPS nav system, and there is no technical problem. It's mature technology. LLMs.
And explain to us like the difference between those two fundamental architectures and
so
why
fundamentally, a GPS navigation system is a database and a simple calculation on top of that. So for lots of different individual points, it just has information, how long to get from point A to point B. And then it's just calculating the minimal path. It's kind of classic computer programming. You could build a simple version of it in like Computer Science 101. But fundamentally, it's a database that does a calculation, right? Large language models are really different from that. Basically, what they do is they get the entire internet nowadays. They break the internet up into little tiny pieces and learn about the statistics of where those pieces go together. No representation of, say, actual cities and distances between them or who you are or anything like that. And then they try to reconstruct what is the statistically most probable continuation given you've got a set of tokens. That's why we call them next token predictors, or I once called them autocomplete on steroids. That's what they are. They're autocomplete on steroids. And that gives the illusion of intelligence, but it is really just an illusion. So it works some of the time and not others. The same process drives a hallucination as a correct answer. In both cases, it's just coming up with something statistically probable. So I wrote a Substack a few weeks ago about my friend Harry Shearer. Do we have any Spinal Tap fans in the house? All right. So Harry Shearer is an American entertainer who was born in Los Angeles, and he's known for Spinal Tap. Any Simpsons fans in the house? Harry Shearer does Mr. Burns and like 5 other voices. So he happens to be a friend of mine, and he sent me a biography that was written about him by a large language model. And it said that Harry Shearer was a British entertainer, comedian, etc. He's actually born in LA. He sent this before we were going to have breakfast in LA, which made it all the funnier. And you ask, why does the system do this? Well, what these systems do is they cluster words that are similar together. So they'll put a whole bunch of things that are similar in a vast hyperdimensional space, basically, n-dimensional space. And so Harry Shearer winds up like near John Cleese. And so some people in that cluster are British entertainers. So from the perspective of a system that does this kind of statistical analysis, it's perfectly plausible. What these systems don't do is to look stuff up or sanity check their own work. So I wrote this long Substack going in detail to all the hallucinations in a short thing about him. It also said that the name of his character was like David, some of the other, Smith or something. And anybody who's seen the movie knows his character's name is Derek Smalls. It just made up, it's just wrong. You go to the first page of his Wikipedia entry, all of that stuff is explained. We have this illusion that these things are smart because they mimic so much stuff. But if they were smart, they would check what they're saying against Wikipedia. When I gave my TED Talk, which I happen to give right here in this building a couple of years ago, I used the example of one of these systems saying that Elon Musk in 2018 died in a car crash. Well, obviously Elon Musk didn't die in a car crash. We have evidence every day that he's alive. If there's anybody that we know is still alive, it's Elon Musk. He's on Twitter like 24/7. There's news articles written about him 24/7. Obviously, he's alive. Any intelligent system would weigh the evidence and be like, this is insane. He couldn't have died in 2018. But these systems are not smart enough to do that. They are just autocomplete on steroids. And if you do the autocomplete thing, you have like Elon Musk owns Tesla. Some people who own Teslas died in car crashes. It's not even reasoning about it. It's just looking at the probabilities of these words in proximity to one another. And he might be in some news articles where somebody else died. Joe Smith died in a Tesla crash. Elon Musk gave no comment or something like that. And then it scrambles all that up, and you get this spew that we call hallucinations.
And there's more and more work at these tech companies that have invested so much time and energy into these models to try and ground them in the truth and to try to do work trying to understand how they come to the conclusions that they do so that they can maybe make fixes to that. Do you feel like that work is valuable in some regard? Do you see a place in the AI landscape for these generative models in some form? Or do you feel like that's
well, that was two
wasted
questions.
effort?
So
it is two questions, but you gave
so I think that's fine, but I'm just going to separate them out. I see some use for these systems. I do not see much hope for curing hallucinations. So the uses are in domains where the hallucinations don't matter. For example, because the cost of an error is not that high. For example, coding is actually a great application. It's not perfect because of the slop squatting problem and so forth. But in general, the users there are people who know how to debug errors. And they're very attentive to errors. Like, you don't become a good software developer if you don't understand debugging, which is kind of like a Sherlock Holmes problem-solving thing. So if you can do that stuff, you can become a programmer. If you can't do that stuff, you won't make it through Computer Science 101. You give up and you'll be like, this is not for me, which happens to some people, right? So some people get it and some people don't. But the people who make their living as coders can all do it, right? And so when it creates a hallucination, which it does all the time in coding, they can find the error and fix it. I mean, there is a joke that it used to take like 12 hours to type your code and an hour to debug it. Now it can be like 2 minutes to code it with a machine, and it might take 24 hours to debug it. Because like you're debugging somebody else's code, right? When you write your own code, you kind of know how it works. When you're debugging someone else's code is a problem. But in general, it can help because there's a human in the loop paying attention who's competent to solve it. Whereas, like, if you have it give medical advice and it says something that stupid and does not fit you, you might not catch it. Imagine you have it give advice for your kid and it hasn't asked enough questions and it answers on analogy to things that have been told to an adult, and you give it a dose that's 4 times big, but you're not a doctor and you don't know, and so you give 2,000 milligrams where for your kid it should have been 200 or whatever. And so there are applications where it's not useful, and there are applications where it are, and it mostly is a question about cost of error and things like that. But to the other part of the question, are the hallucinations going away? Not like this. It might be that large language models are a component in a larger system. They do have their value, but they're not competent on their own. They're always going to be black boxes, by which I mean you know what the input is, You know what the output is, but you don't really know how you get there, and you don't really know in advance whether it's going to be right. So you can't like do proofs as we do in some parts of computer science. So for example, Windows device drivers, there's formal proof that they work. Certain parts of airplane navigation systems, there's formal proof that they work. There's never any formal proof whatsoever in an LM. It's always hit or miss. Or there's a lovely phrase from an Israeli AI company which is called prompt and pray. You know, you write the best prompt that you can imagine, and you pray that it works. And maybe it does, and maybe it works on Tuesdays and not Thursdays, and you have no idea why. Like I did a prompt the other day, I was testing some of the visual stuff, and I said, draw a picture of a person with a monocle, okay? And this was with Grok. Monocle on their left eye, because a friend of mine noticed they had a lot of trouble with left and right. So I was trying this out. And instead of giving me a person, it gave me a gorilla, and it gave 2 monocles. Now, why did it do that? It's not because it confused, well, sort of. It's not really because it confused a person and a gorilla, but because I'd asked a question earlier in the session about a person. Have 2 people shaking hands, or shaking their left hand. And then we have what's called a context buffer, which nowadays can be a lot. And so it confused something else in the context in this insane way. And so like you never know when that's going to happen. You're never going to be able to trust it, and you can never look inside.
Let's talk about other areas that you would want to see more investment and research into. So what are the other areas of AI that you feel are not getting enough attention or funding right now?
Number 1 at the top of my list, though there's probably arguments for others, but the thing I know the best is neurosymbolic AI, which is what I was talking about in my 2001 book. And the idea is that large language models and the family that they're part of, which we call neural networks, have some genuine value. They're good at making statistical summaries of the world, for example. They're not good at things like reasoning. Classical AI is also what we call symbolic AI. That looks like computer programming or algebra or logic in philosophy and so forth. You have operations over variables. The reason that I called that book The Algebraic Mind is because, to quote, I guess it was Bishop Berkeley that I quoted at the beginning of the book, thought is a kind of algebra. So there's some piece of our thought where we manipulate these algebraic abstractions. Anybody who's ever computer programmed for more than a week understands what that is. You write these functions and manipulate variables. That has to be part of the answer because it gives you the generalization that you need and that large language models aren't. So somehow, we have to bring these together. And there's a really good metaphor here for many people, which is many people probably know Daniel Kahneman. Some people read Thinking Fast and Slow. In that book, he talks about what he calls System 1 and System 2. And System 1 is fast, reflexive, statistical, automatic. And System 2 is deliberative, it's reasoning. And you know, the human mind has both. It doesn't always integrate them well. I actually wrote a whole book about that called Kludge, about why it is we don't integrate them well. But we have those two, they balance each other. We need that in AI.
You've argued for that kind of hybrid system that combines these different kinds of artificial intelligence together. And what would you, in your mind, be able to achieve with that kind of a system that we can't achieve today with either types of architecture?
So you get interpretability straight out of the gate. So you can understand at least what the symbolic system is doing. You want to maybe use the neural network part as input somewhere, but somewhere you want to have symbolic representations that are interpretable, that are much more debuggable. So what happens when a large language model fails? You just add more data. It's very different from a classical system where you figure out, like, where's the bug? How do I fix it? You can't really do that in a large language model. But if you have a neurosymbolic system, you can do some debugging on those lines. So you get some advantages out of the gate. What I think ultimately you get is a chance to solve what we call the alignment problem. So the alignment problem is these systems don't do what we ask them to do. We say don't tell people about biological weapons, and they do anyway. Or the Apple system prompt said don't hallucinate, and the systems hallucinated so much they had to take them off the market. What you can get with symbolic systems is you can have explicit constraints about how things work or don't work, and have the system actually obey them. You can talk to them in the language of computer programming, or maybe in human language, although there's some qualifications there. You can be much more direct with the system and expect them to do what you want. If we're going to hook these things up essentially to the entire universe, like our planet, to all the infrastructure and so forth, we should know that we can guarantee that they function properly. It is insane what we're doing now, hooking these things up like in military military context and so forth, when we know that they're not reliable. And soon, like, most of the US government is going to run on these things. I mean, imagine you need some government service in the United States now, and you try to talk to a chatbot, and it doesn't work, and how do you even get a human on the line? I just had that experience with Google. This is not pleasant, and it's not functional. Like, I think what we're going to see in the next year is the quality of services in the United States is going to go down markedly because people who know what they're doing are going to be replaced by machines that don't really.
Well, these large language models are also, I think the companies that are making them are starting to see it's harder and harder to improve performance over time. So as that plateaus, do you feel like some of these companies might switch some of their focus to symbolic systems or other architectures?
They might. In the long run, for sure, I think 100%. And just in the last, I would say 6 months, there's been some wising up. Everybody thought they were going to rush to GPT-5 after GPT-4, and it's now been 2.5 years, and it's not for lack of trying, right? It's not even necessarily for the lack of data, though we talk about that. But OpenAI tried to make GPT-5. They had something called Project Orion, and I won't say it stank, but it didn't meet expectations. And so they renamed it GPT-4.5. The thing you're seeing that a lot of people find to be disappointing was supposed to be GPT-5. So there was that. Grok 3 was supposed to be like, amazing, and it's fine, but it was like 10 times as expensive as Grok 2 and only a little bit better. And the whole industry has realized that we're getting diminishing returns. There's some talk about these special, quote, reasoning models. We could go into it. But the basic idea that you could solve everything by just adding more data has not really worked. Or to take another example, O3 is one of the best models out now, and it hallucinates more, not less, than its predecessor. There was this notion that you add more data, everything gets better. It's kind of almost for free. You just need to pour the crank. And so people fought desperately for data. They ripped off artists and writers left and right. They downloaded YouTube videos they didn't have license to. Everybody thought, we get the data and we're good. And what they discovered in the last 6 months, whether they say it publicly or not, is that that's not true. And so they are scrambling a bit. That's making them maybe a little bit more open-minded about how to do this. DeepMind has always been a bit more open-minded than the rest. AlphaFold is actually a hybrid system. It's not a general purpose one like a chatbot, but it is a hybrid system focused on protein folding. You'd get the input as a list of nucleotides, a sequence of nucleotides. The output is a three-dimensional protein. So there is some work that's outside the mainstream, but there's also all this wild financial stuff that goes with everybody being part of this fad. And there's this huge, excuse me, kind of fear of missing out. Like, nobody wants to be not there when AGI happens. And they've all convinced themselves, I think wrongly, that this is the royal path. Most of them, I don't think, ever took a class in cognitive science. If they had, I think they'd be like, yeah, I don't think this is really going to work, which is what I've been trying to tell them for 20 years, or 25 years. Slowly it's dawning on them. But because of this almost like cult-like thing, not that many people have done that much outside the box.
Yeah, I think that's that so-called scaling law that you referred to, that just with more compute, with more data, these models can scale up and at some point develop some semblance of intelligence, maybe even super intelligence. So why do you think that theory has taken such a strong hold on Silicon Valley in particular? And what is the fundamental flaw that you see there?
I mean, I keep thinking of this old book about mass delusions, right? I mean, people thought that tulips were going to be worth infinite amount of money, right? Ideas just set hold, and there are economics behind them, and so forth. So, like, for example, it is in the interest of every investor to keep this myth alive, because investors get paid in two ways. One is if they have a big hit, but the other is if they get 2% of the money they're investing. And so if the money they're investing is in the billions, they get rich immediately off the 2%. I guess you call it the carry. They get rich immediately. And so they're not going to be here when it all falls apart. They're already going to have made, $50, $100 million. They're perfectly happy. And so they're very incented to make this kind of deal. And then that means they hype it. We have people working in the media. I won't, name names, but people in the media who basically they're so-called AI influencers, and their beat is to tell you that like AGI is going to be here next week, and they get followers because people want to be here in this magical moment. Think back to an earlier era with like selling snake oil. Like some of it is like a cult-like thing. People want to be there in the moment. There are different reasons for different people. But I think by now the evidence, look, it's a hypothesis. The hypothesis was scaling will get us to AGI. And now, we've spent $500 billion collectively testing that hypothesis. It's more money, I think, than any hypothesis in history has ever gotten. And everybody keeps getting the same results. It's insane. You have like 20 different companies doing the same experiments, getting the same results from the same data. Like, hello?
Yeah, in your latest book, Taming Silicon Valley, you referred to OpenAI as the next WeWork, talking about how an overinflated company might meet with a sudden collapse. So I guess I got to ask you, do you think we're in an AI boom or an AI bubble right now?
We're in a bubble. I mean, LLMs are not going anywhere. They're useful technology, and now they're cheap because everybody is building the same thing. That leads to a price war. So, they're cheap enough that they'll have some utility in the world. But so far, the revenue has been like $7 billion against $500 billion expenditure. So, it's a financial bubble. The companies like OpenAI, in my view, are overvalued. And I mean, you look at NVIDIA, which is one barometer of this, and it was going up and up and up like a rocket. And for the last year, I think it's made 20% as compared to the year before. It tripled or whatever it did. Even NVIDIA seems to have slowed down. And they're the company that are selling shovels in the gold rush. The fact that they're slowing down is because some people are realizing this is not quite as good as the media campaigns of companies like OpenAI led us to believe. I just saw a study that said 7,000 companies were surveyed to see whether AI actually affected their bottom line. And the answer was no. And at some point when people realize they're paying all this money, they're doing these trials, they're never reliable enough, the hallucinations never go away, companies start to pull back. So some companies will be able to make use of it, but it was sold as this universal thing, like snake oil was going to solve absolutely everything, and it's not, and people are wising up.
Do you think that's true in the general public as well? Do you feel the sentiment shifting where there's been so much hype and buzz and enthusiasm for some of these early tools, ChatGPT, as people were playing with them, but then are we now kind of coming to a moment where folks are feeling disappointed?
You're not old enough to remember Pat Rocks, but maybe somebody in the audience is. I mean, people got all excited about rocks as pets, or the Furby was a little stuffed animal.
I do remember Furby.
Furbies learned to speak, except it was all a cheat. It was a fraud, right? Because what Furbies would, I mean, fraud's too strong a word, but I shouldn't have said that. Lawyers, please edit that out. The Furbies, it was a trick. They had built in simpler language, and then a couple days later it'd be more complicated language. And so you had the illusion that you were teaching them. But, it was a fad for a while. It was like the best-selling toy, and then people got tired of it. I think some people are getting tired of LLMs. Some are, some aren't, but some people definitely are. They're like, I thought it was going to get better, and it hasn't. I've started to see even some of these so-called AI influencers that make their living writing hypey tweets on the internet and so forth start to, express some disappointment, like we're not getting what we were promised. And, that seems like the leading edge of something like that.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about here on opening night, Gary. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vancouver.
All right, that was great talk from Gary. I hope you enjoyed it. William, what is your take on AI from a Canadian perspective?
I don't know if I have a take.
Okay.
The future with AI is scary sometimes. It's exciting. I don't know what the future holds, but I can bet that Canadian companies, maybe like Cohere in Toronto or Variational AI here in Vancouver and MerchKit, I think they will be at the forefront of it. That's what I can tell you.
Okay, great, awesome. All right, so let's turn the focus to you, Sam. You're a social media creator. What social media do you use the most?
I love Instagram and TikTok, specifically Instagram. I feel like you can foster a really great community there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what's your handle there on Instagram?
OMG, hey Sam.
All right, if you're new to town, you got to follow her to find out the cool stuff there. Okay, so let's get to our final talk of opening night. I'm going to ask everybody, I can't really see, but how many people are in the audience are still on X or Twitter? Raise your hand. Okay, not that many, okay. How many people are using Threads? Threads, a few more? All right, maybe just shout out your favorite social media. Who said OnlyFans? Okay. Come on, come on.
Every few years, we're forced to start over. New platforms, new profiles, and the exhausting task of rebuilding our networks. But what if the next generation of social media didn't require a reset?
Our next speaker is building exactly that. As CEO of Blue Sky, she's leading the charge to create a decentralized social network powered by the AT protocol, one that gives users control over their data, their identity, and their feed. Blue Sky was originally incubated by Twitter in 2019 and then independently spun out. As of today, it has grown to more than 35 million users. It's a radical rethinking of how online communities should function. Open, portable, and built to empower individuals rather than platforms.
How can open networks rewrite the rules of social media and give back power to the users? To explore what the next era of social media will look like in conversation with Katie Drummond from Wired, please welcome the CEO of Blue Sky, Jay Graber.
The election is creating an earthquake in the social media universe.
Blue Sky enjoying huge growth.
People are looking for better alternatives.
People are tired of the algorithm deciding everything.
They're looking for forms of social that don't feel as toxic, that give them more control.
Deepfakes, speculative information. Decentralization means a more democratic way where users get to vote.
We've ended up giving over our lives to CEOs have styled themselves as self-made monarchs. We have to remember where the power really lies. We gave them that power, and we can take it back.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me, Katie.
So nice to be here with you. And I will just say, as a born and raised Canadian, it is so nice to be at an event this big and this ambitious and this international in Vancouver. Pretty incredible. And you are actually just a few hours away, right? Seattle.
Yep.
Why Seattle?
I like the city. It's a good spot.
A lot of nature.
A lot of nature.
Just like here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Well, let's get down to business. So as our introducers talked a little bit about, right, Blue Sky started as an experiment, right? It was incubated inside Twitter. It spun out later on, became an invitation-only service in 2023. By the time you opened up to the general public in 2024, some things had changed, right? Twitter had become X. Things there had gotten a little bit more interesting than maybe they were a few years ago. And I really think that, Blue Sky became seen as something of like a refuge, right, for a certain set of people. People, for example, who didn't vote for Donald Trump in the US election, right? It was really seen as sort of this like safe space for certain communities. But your view, and I think your very strongly held view, is that Blue Sky is for everyone. And a lot of that is about how your platform is actually designed. So let's maybe start there to sort of ground everybody in what makes Blue Sky as a platform distinct from this, this sort of previous era that still exists, but not an era that as many people are participating in anymore, of centralized social media. Why is Blue Sky different?
Yeah, I mean, people probably know some of the story, but I can back up and give a bit of it. Basically, Blue Sky started off as a project within Twitter, back when it was called Twitter, and the goal was to build an open protocol that Twitter would run on as an app. And the idea was to get back to some of the early open web principles of you have protocols that you can build websites on, and social itself should be a protocol that then you build social apps on. And so that was the app protocol, which we built out first, and then built the Blue Sky app as an app on top of the app protocol. And the goal of that is to build a decentralized social network. And what that means is that you get to have the choice to leave with your identity and your data, use different apps. Now, that full vision I can get into more. It's not fully built out yet. This is really the start. But we see Blue Sky as this lobby to the open social web, which is many applications, many experiences, and ultimately returning more choice and control to the user.
And let's just sort of say that someone is a user. Let's say they've been using Twitter or X for many years, and they sort of move over and they decide to try Blue Sky. In terms of that decentralization, what will they notice? Like, how is the user experience different for the everyday person?
Yeah, we actually try to keep it familiar at first glance. And so if you want to just hop on and use it like it's Twitter, you can do that. And you don't have to change anything. You don't have to like do much customization up front. But if you want to dive in and see what's under the hood, there's things like custom feeds, which give you an option to control your scroll. So you get to choose what kind of timeline you're on. And that means choosing your algorithm. It means you can have algorithms built by other developers. There's been thousands of these built. Some of them function a bit like communities. So you have the science feed, for example, which is run by scientists. You have the news feed, which has just articles from verified news orgs like Wired and other organizations. And then you have custom algorithms that people have built that might show you posts based off your close friends, or posts that relate to your interests based on what you give it. And this means that there's an open market that allows innovation to happen around the most important part of social, which is what you see. This is also true for moderation. You can build your own moderation service and stack it on top of the Blue Sky app's moderation. So within the app, we have this foundation that we run, and then on top of that, you can add layers of customization. This customization extends down to your username. You can bring a domain name and have that as your user ID.
But you don't have to get too complicated. You can also just use it sort of the way you would maybe comfortably use something that you had used previously. Now, Blue Sky has seen just colossal growth and momentum and success in the last several months. I mean, I think the last time Wired talked to you, maybe a year and a half ago, we were talking about 5 million users. I think the last time we interviewed you a couple weeks ago, we were close to 35 million, which is like a shocking amount of growth. With all of that success, obviously, come challenges. You talked a little bit about moderation a minute ago. I'm curious, when we're thinking about moderation, we're thinking about dis and misinformation, harmful content, right? That's something that, to me, conventional social media, traditional social media, has obviously grappled with for a very long time. I don't know that they have ever solved it in a way that I would describe as truly satisfying. How do those challenges show up for Blue Sky, and sort of how are you tackling the moderation piece of this within a decentralized model?
Yeah, we have many of the same challenges. We're a social site like any other in some ways, and we also apply some of the same types of solutions. So, we use a combination of human and automated systems to keep on top of various kinds of issues that you have in a social network. But then we also believe very much in opening up the interfaces for innovation to happen on moderation, as on anything else. And so if you want to come in and build your own labeler that labels, say, spam, or some category of things that you think that you have some unique expertise in, maybe around issues affecting your community, you can do that. And if you want to have a different kind of moderation that you try out in another application, the fact that it's an open protocol means you can do that as well. And so our bet is that we can do our best, but if we don't get everything right, there's alternatives for people to build other approaches.
Right, people can sort of turn the dial up or they can turn it down depending on what they want to be exposed to, what they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and then even within the application, the way we do things, we try to provide doorways into this kind of freedom that exists on the broader protocol, because it's all very abstract until a developer builds it. And we are developers building out this app, so we want to give you a chance as a user, even if you don't know how to code, the ability to have some, way to change this. So we open sourced Ozone, for example. It's our open source moderation tool for the atmosphere. The ozone is the protective layer for the atmosphere. And that's an application that you can use to build your own moderation service. You don't have to know how to code. It takes some setup to figure out, but it's something that you can do as a regular user. And this gives you more control, because you can come in and decide, okay, well, it's not quite working for me, but maybe I can change things. And we're always trying to make that easier so that we're lowering the barriers to entry.
Got it, right. Now, one thing that I have found, so I use Blue Sky. The entire Wired staff is on Blue Sky. We are sort of ride or die Blue Sky users, all of us. And you can really, genuinely, truly find your community on Blue Sky, whatever that community is. So for me, I'm a news junkie. I follow all of the entire Wired newsroom. I follow other journalists. I exist in this very delightful, always on news bubble, and I love my bubble, right? And so you go on Blue Sky, you find your community. I think, though, that the overlap, or the risk of an overlap between community and echo chamber is very real, right? So there's this possibility that you sort of find your little world on Blue Sky, and it's sort of your safe space, and you stay there. And so you sort of have your own ideals and values reflected back at you. How do you sort of think about that and respond to that? And what would you encourage for sort of anyone in the audience who might be interested in pushing themselves, right, and exposing themselves to more of this big world of blue sky that's actually out there? I'm also asking for myself because I really I need to get out of my little bubble a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information out there on the internet now. You can really just silo in the corner you want to be in. But if you want to get out of it, there's also, other than just following new accounts, which is one way to do it, you can follow new feeds or even dip into them and see what's going on over here. I sometimes search random things to see if there's a feed for it, and often there is. So for example, I looked up fountain pens. There's a fountain pen feed.
Fountain pens?
Fountain pen, yeah, like fountain pen enthusiasts.
A weird number of people I know are obsessed with fountain pens right now, but okay, I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's something that's very interesting to me, and the fact that a lot of people are like posting their fountain pens into this feed and like talking about it and having this community discussion about a topic I don't know much about is really interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing I look for is starter packs. So we're still integrating more ways you can discover these in the app, but starter packs are something where you can build a list of accounts and feeds as a package and give it to somebody in a link or QR code on Blue Sky. And I found lots of interesting things through this. There's other sites that have built indexes of all the starter packs, so you can go search for them if you just do a Google search. And I found a commodities trading starter pack. I didn't know that there were commodities traders on Blue Sky, but I found this and tried it out. Like you can sort of see the feed of like what this group of accounts is posting about and get into some other niches that way.
You can sort of like dip in and explore and then opt in or opt out.
Yeah, what are the ones that you've discovered in your efforts to branch out?
Well, I mean, I'm a tech journalist, so I spend a lot of time looking at sort of like the science community is really, really strong on Blue Sky. I love cute animal pictures and videos. I have a 7-year-old at home, so we spend a lot of time in that little world. But this is a real challenge, I think, and it's a challenge with conventional sort of centralized social media too, is this sort of this idea of bubbles, right, and of sort of staying in your little bubble and not being exposed to conversations that are happening at the periphery or sort of in a totally different like part of the internet. I mean, X arguably has turned into like one giant echo chamber, right? And so it's interesting to hear about how Blue Sky creates that optionality without forcing all of these different ideas on a given person.
Yeah. One more thing I'll say is, I recently followed a medieval studies starter pack I found. It's very interesting. It changed my feed significantly. But the open interface for the algorithms that you can build means that people can build things that might even try to build a randomized feed or just like show you different things. There was one experiment someone did where they grouped all the users on Blue Sky. This was a bit earlier, so we had fewer users. Grouped them all into teams, like random teams. So you're just thrown into like a team with a random group of users, and then you would go into the feed and you'd see all the posts from that random subset, completely random group of users. And so that
just
was
get
like
to know them.
Yeah, you can just kind of do this sort of like random sort and say like, okay, like what if my timeline was just random people today? Or you could, maybe say, well, here are my interests, show me the opposite of that. And you could build a timeline that shows you that. And so people are playing around with those options, and I'm really curious to see what emerges long term from that.
That's very cool. I didn't know about the random people thing. I'm gonna do that. I'm a voyeuristic, and I like to know what people are up to, so I'm gonna do that. Now, I think that you alluded to this, but I think that's something people often miss about Blue Sky. They're focused on Blue Sky, the social network. What they don't realize is that Blue Sky is built on an open protocol, right? And that protocol actually includes other services. Can you explain that? And how can a Blue Sky user, let's say someone in the audience goes out and makes an account, how can they actually start to dip their toe into these other services that exist on the same protocol?
Yeah, there's apps that have been built that are getting some traction, like Skylight is a sort of a short-form video TikTok alternative that was recently backed by Mark Cuban and has seen a lot of growth. And it's built on the same protocol as Blue Sky. It's built on the app protocol. It also shares a lot of the same infrastructure, so meaning if you post videos on Skylight, you can see them on Blue Sky and vice versa. And so that's an example of how you can start to have these different applications sharing, the same login for the user from the user's perspective, and some of the same data. So you could cross-post across platforms because they're all in this shared network. I think there's different ways to discover this. Right now, a lot of it's like not the search in-app, but you can search for it on Google and find these different apps. And some of them offer different interfaces to the microblogging experience. Like, Pink Sky was an app I was playing around with the other day that, is like kind of an image-focused app, and it lets you it has a pink interface instead, and changes the UX and the color, but you're still ultimately interacting from your account. There's all sorts of things out there, like different sorts of blogging tools, things like that, and I think the goal is to build this out so that it becomes a replacement for a lot of how we've thought about social media, because you can build an entirely new social world in this kind of open way.
It's fascinating. Now, that's a fascinating world that's being built. At the same time, Blue Sky is a public benefit corporation, but you are a for-profit company. Just public benefit essentially means you don't need to maximize shareholder value. You're the company's CEO. What is a day in the life of this job for you right now, as Blue Sky is having so much momentum, so much growth? It's on this wild trajectory. What is a day for Jay?
It's juggling a lot of things.
I noticed backstage, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're still a pretty small team, and we are...
How big is the team?
25 people.
25 people.
Yeah.
To support 35 million users. That's incredible.
Yeah, people often don't believe us, but we're doing a lot with a small team.
You are.
And so all of us wear a lot of hats, and we're constantly juggling not just all that it takes to run this social app, but we're building towards this longer-term vision. And so at every step, when we make decisions within the app or we're building a new feature, we ask, how does this affect the other apps that are out there? How does this affect the long-term vision? We recently rolled out verification, for example, because that was needed to make sure that people could trust the accounts were not impersonators.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that we did in a hybrid way, like we do a lot of things. So we do a centralized verification process through Blue Sky and issue a badge for accounts that we've verified, but also we delegate it out. So we created a delegated verifiers program where news organizations and other institutions can verify their journalists, and you can have a system that sort of builds more points of trust than just the one that we hold as one company. And actually, the way that we do verification is there's an open protocol primitive. That's the verify, and anyone can issue these. So if you look at just the fire hose of data flowing through the network, there's all sorts of verifications people are throwing around. Most of them don't show up in the app because they're not ones that we trust, but you could build another app that does a whole different verification system using some of the same underlying infrastructure. You could borrow some of the verifications that the Blue Sky has done, that the delegated verifiers have done, and then you could issue your own. And then it's up to the user to choose, well, do I trust the verified system on the Blue Sky app, or do I want to try this different app and see what their verification system works like?
Wow. I mean, Wired actually is a verifier now. So I get DMs from people saying, can Wired verify me? I'm like, sure. Well, it depends who you are, but probably. Now, for-profit company, right? So you are expected at some point for Blue Sky to be profitable, I would imagine. Talk to me about that sort of monetization within the context of a decentralized social network. I mean, you look at Facebook, you look at X, I no longer have an X account if I'm being completely candid. But when I did, it's flooded with advertisements, right? It's a very sort of simple equation. Your data, right? We're going to run ads against that. That's how we're going to maximize revenue for this social network. That can't possibly be what's in store for Blue Sky. So what does that look like for you guys?
Well, the first step is subscriptions, which we've said are coming for a while. They actually are on the way. But we think that there's a variety of ways that we are moving into monetization. Long term, we want to build a marketplace around all the different services and all the different things that people are building on the app. But that's a broader play for the broader ecosystem. And what we know about advertising is we've seen a lot of apps go down this path of centralizing everything not just into one app, but onto one feed where the most attention is directed and where the most ad revenue can come from. And then, that sort of has these externalities, negative effects of, you optimize for time spent and just like pure engagement, even if it's not healthy engagement, because you're able to show more ads that way. Sometimes you even degrade the quality of the feed so people keep scrolling so they see more ads. Like these are kind of just the downstream effects of optimizing for one metric. So we're very wary of that. But on the other hand, we know ads work their way into every attention economy long term. It's just, we don't want to, spam your feed with ads. And one important feature is the fact that you can choose a different timeline means that we've built ourselves open from the start. So if we started putting ads into the feed, you could switch over to another feed within the Blue Sky app. And then if you didn't like the Blue Sky app, you could switch over to another app because it's all open source and it's on this open protocol. So I think creating these constraints for ourselves at the beginning means that we get more creative about how we're approaching this problem, and that we've made sure that users always have the right to leave. If they don't like the choices we make, they can go somewhere else. And now other services in the ecosystem, there's Graze, which is a site that's helping you build custom feeds. If you want to do a no-code version of your own feed, you can do this, and they let you put some sponsored posts in now. Those aren't ads that we're running. They're just like trying it out. But then it's something where they can experiment with business models on their own. And then if users say, oh, this is a tolerable amount, maybe they'll keep scrolling. And if they don't like it, they'll switch to another feed because there's thousands.
That's fascinating. You can sort of keep running away from the ads as they keep finding you on Blue Sky. I love that.
It's much like the web, actually. If you think about the rest of the internet, there's ads, but you can install ad blockers. You can use a different search engine if you don't like the ads at the top of the one that you're seeing. And then the fact that it's an open protocol means somebody can always build a new search engine. There was DuckDuckGo. Like now there's AI search engines like Perplexity. Like it's open to competition and innovation because users aren't locked in and the data is open.
Yeah, and so you're going to be forced to compete for market share, I guess. Now, what about the future of those traditional ad-driven social networks? I mean, Blue Sky, almost 35 million users, but you look at sort of the scale of Facebook, right? You look at Threads, right? Hundreds of millions of users. These are massive platforms. I think they are platforms that more and more people are feeling alienated from. Do you think that ad-driven model, that traditional centralized ad-driven model for social media is on the way out? Or do you think that these two things can exist simultaneously in sort of like a healthy way on the internet?
I think that things are changing a lot in social. I hesitate to make strong predictions about what the future is like, but I do think that we're at sort of an inflection point in social and a lot of stuff on the web where a lot is changing. AI is changing a lot of things. There's a lot of fatigue around how social media has historically worked. And I think that in the future we'll want to know, like, are we talking to real people? Like, are we having authentic conversations in authentic spaces? And a lot of that comes from building better ways of doing social. And that's not probably going to come from one company. That's going to come from a lot of builders, developers tinkering around, applying their own creativity and solutions to the problem that we're facing. So that's why we made our bet on open interfaces, so that if it's not us that comes up with the best great new idea, someone else building on the app protocol might be the one to come up with a great idea. And then because it's open, everyone can borrow those ideas and we'll evolve the state of social faster that way as a collective effort, rather than saying, 3 people are going to decide the future of social and we hope that they get it right.
Now, I'm not going to name sort of any 3 people who are running social right now, but, it does feel relevant to me to point out that, you are a female CEO of a social network in an industry that is dominated by very wealthy, very powerful men, many of whom just happen to lead some of those very prominent social networks and consumer-facing technology companies. What can they learn from you, and what can they learn from your company?
The focus we've always kept is that users can have a choice over their experience, developers can have the freedom to build, and creators can keep their relationship with their audience. Those are the principles we focused in on early on, and I think that those are important not just for us, but for anyone who wants to steward social in a good way. And I think really thinking about it as stewarding a social ecosystem as like a conversation infrastructure for society is the right way to think about it, because we are putting something out there as builders that other people are learning about the world from, that they are building their worldviews and getting information, having fun, making friends, connecting with people. And when you build something that critical, it's really a communication infrastructure for society, you need to stay focused on how is it affecting society and how can we build something that has amount of humility in how we build things and keeps open the possibility that we're wrong in the choices we make. And if we are, then we want to make sure that someone else can get it right, because it's very important for society that the outcomes of this kind of communication infrastructure ultimately support pro-social outcomes. And so that's part of our philosophy around openness, is that we will try our best, and then if we don't get it right, maybe someone else can make another attempt.
Now, one of the big challenges for any social network right now, I mean, really sort of anyone operating digitally at all, is AI, right? And is generative AI in all sorts of different contexts, right? There's the dis and misinformation, the deepfakes piece of it. There is generative AI being trained on user data, which is something that Blue Sky, I believe it was last year, you specifically came out and said, this is not something that we have any plans to do. Your content, the content of your feed, will not be used to train Gen AI. Can you talk to us at all about sort of how your company is thinking about artificial intelligence, whether it's generative AI, AI as an internal tool? Do you see it as sort of one effective tool in your toolbox? And if so, how? And from a user point of view, how do you think about that sort of deluge of what's become known essentially as AI slop, right? Just sort of junk that's proliferating across the internet. 2 questions.
Yeah, I mean, AI is affecting a lot of things, and the reason that we put out this thing earlier this year that said it was a proposal for a framework as to how user consent could be specified on their posts. This isn't something we can technically enforce right now, but in looking at the problems that it's potentially causing with how users put their data out there on the open web, there's actually a larger question beyond blue sky of what's going to happen to the open web, even blogs. Everything is sort of out there and being fed into large language models. And so what is the future of the open web? I think that's the larger question. And so we think that there should be frameworks around user consent. There'll probably be something that we'll eventually arrive at collectively as a society. It's not blue sky that's going to necessarily come up with a singular solution on that. But we don't train Gen AI on users' posts because we're not an AI company. On the other hand, we do get lots of AI content coming through the network, and some of it is spam, some of it is just like all sorts of stuff people don't want to see. And in order to keep up with that, it really is a cat and mouse game. We have to use AI ourselves. Sort of the state of moderation and curation is advancing, and AI is kind of the state of the art as to how you build these systems around how do you create the feed that gives you the stuff you want? How do you create moderation that keeps up with all the bots? And some of them, many of them now are AI generated and getting increasingly advanced. I think it's one of those things where you have to recognize that it's a new technology with a lot of good and bad that comes with it, and it's a double-edged sword. And you have to learn how to use it if you're going to stay on top of history and not get left behind.
Yeah, for sure. Let's end, I hope, on a utopian note, something that Wired strives for. It's been harder and harder for us in the last few years to get there, but I think you're a good person to talk through this. Let's imagine that Blue Sky becomes the dominant social network and that this protocol does really become sort of the new backbone for social networks and social media, the way that we interact on the internet. This decentralized approach, it wins. We come back in 2 years, we're having this conversation, Blue Sky won. What does the internet look like in that scenario? Give us your blue sky.
Well, 2 years might be a bit fast because the long-term goal
5 years
is the atmosphere, which the name blue sky also signifies our intent that this is a beginning. Blue sky is not the end goal. It's the start. We built an open source app that's a lobby to the social internet, and ultimately there will be many other applications, and users will be able to move between them. Developers will be able to come in, constantly build new ones. There'll be a lot more innovation in social because you'll be able to come in and build any idea you have, whether that's for a really small app that invites your friends like a Secret Santa thing, or if it's a big app that's like a whole new rethinking of social in VR or something like that. And all of this can take place in a way where the early web took off in this way, where you had these browsers that opened up a world of websites that people were building. And then your access to the web was no longer through one portal, like AOL used to be. Now it was all these different websites, and you accessed it through Netscape or Chrome or Firefox or something like that. And so I think that's the analogy for the direction we're taking things, which is being a browser for the social web and having many other things out there, and having a world where, as a user, you have a lot more experiences to choose from. Not just like the social apps out there today, but many more customizations within the apps, many other experiences, because developers are no longer getting shut out of building new social apps because they're not fighting these huge network effects just to get started. And then as a creator, you'll have a direct relationship with your audience, because your audience now is a connection you have to your followers, and you can take that with you across apps. That's already starting to be true. So if you build up a follower for your, let's say, Book Sky videos, and you're doing book reviews, and then you go over to Skylight and open your account on Skylight, you can still connect with those same people. They can still see your videos, and as Skylight gets more users in, you're building off what you already built on Blue Sky. It's all cumulative rather than starting from scratch each time.
Yeah.
So I think that's
start over and over again.
Yeah, before I did Blue Sky, I actually started a different social app that was an events app that was sort of like a Partiful or one of these apps that was going to be an alternative to Facebook events. And it was really hard to get started because you have to start from zero each time, and you have to get each user to create a new login with you, start over, rebuild the social graph. And you can't, even if the user says, yes, I would like to use this app and I would like it to be able to invite my friends to this event, you can't really get that from Facebook. Right. And so if you have a world where you can get that for a new app, then as a builder, why aren't you building anything you can think of, because now you have the ability to get it off the ground and as soon as you can build your idea and get it up and running.
Well, I can't wait to see where it goes. Jay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, go this.
All right, that's it for opening night. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you tonight at the Night Summit, which is up in Bentall Center, about a 5-minute walk from here. And we'll be back here kicking off day one, 9:30 a.m. right here on center stage. Thank you. Good night.